Welcome back. An extraordinarily emotional day on Capitol Hill today. A dramatic testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford accusing US President Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee Judge Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her. As we go to air, we're hearing a response from Kavanaugh himself. The hearing on Capitol Hill today coming at the 11th hour before a scheduled Friday committee Kavanaugh's confirmation. That event now in doubt after a lengthy, emotional and powerful Senate hearing today. Dr. Ford saying she had nothing to gain from coming forward other than feeling she had to as part of her civic duty.
Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes. He had a hard time because he was very inebriated and because I was wearing a one-piece bathing suit underneath my clothing. I believed he was going to rape me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me. Both Brett and Mark were drunkenly laughing during the attack.
Tears also from Kavanaugh himself, desperate, and now next to take the stand, he's denying the allegations. Take a listen to what he said just moments ago.
This is not a topic. The day after the allegation appeared, I told this committee that I wanted a hearing as soon as possible to clear my name. I demanded a hearing for the very next day. Unfortunately, it took the committee 10 days to get to this hearing. In those 10 long days, as was predictable and as I predicted, my family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed.
Now, for further details, we go to senior US correspondent Michael Shaw. Michael, of course, as we go to air, we're hearing from Kavanaugh, who's been very emotional. What can you tell us?
Yeah, you know, this morning, Tracy, a lot different from the testimony we're getting right now from Brett Kavanaugh himself. But Christine Blasey Ford today was a very, very emotional opening. It remains so. And the questioning that she got from Democratic senators and from the prosecutor who was hired by the Republican side to question her on the behalf of those senators really evoked a lot of the emotion and the psychological turmoil she's undergone. Of course, you have to remember she's also a psychologist. You heard her mention there, talking about the laughter. That was sort of one of the most poignant moments today, was when one senator asked her, Patrick Leahy of Vermont asked her, what do you remember? What's the one thing that you remember that hurts the most? And it's the laughter, hearing the two boys laughing after it went on. And so then we move to the afternoon, and Brett Kavanaugh gets his day in this she said, he said situation. And what Brett Kavanaugh is now saying, and saying forcefully, is that this was not true, that he doesn't deny that perhaps this happened to Dr. Ford, but it wasn't him. And what, you know, the senators that we spoke to in the hallways here, Tracy, are saying, the Democratic senators are saying that they believe this woman. They think there should be an FBI investigation. Some, Ed Markey of Massachusetts, just told me that he thinks the Republican should withdraw this nomination. And then you had a Republican senator like Lindsey Graham saying he wanted to hear more testimony from Kavanaugh himself. And that's what we got here on Capitol Hill, a crazy day here.
Certainly. Now, as we know, the position in the Senate is a lifelong position. The American public wanting to know the character of the person who could be serving in the most prestigious court in the country, Michael, and in one of the most powerful positions in the country. Is it likely now that Kavanaugh will be confirmed? We're expecting that confirmation hearing tomorrow.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I've said since last week, actually, Tracy, that I don't think he was going to be confirmed since this happened. And I think the hurried vote that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are calling is indicative of the fact that they don't have the support. After this morning's testimony, I would have thought that the support that Kavanaugh would have had would have lessened. But again, he's there now before this committee, before the country, and that could change some minds. It could make some Republicans who may have left the hearing this morning thinking there's no way I could vote to confirm this guy, or there are better conservatives out there, could make them rethink it once they hear Kavanaugh, because his impassioned testimony right now is going to be long. It's going to be arduous, but he is trying to make his case to the Republicans, probably the Republicans who may have been affected by what they heard this morning, as well as some of the female senators there. There are 4 females that are going to question him, which is very different than the last time this kind of I would say a circus happened here in 1991 for Clarence Thomas's hearings. There were no women on this panel. Today there are 4 Democratic women on the panel, Tracy.
Right, and just briefly, we are looking at live images there, of course, of Kavanaugh sniffing back tears there. We know that President Trump had called this a big fat con job by the Democrats, but that he could always be convinced otherwise. Dr. Ford, for her part, poo-pooed those accusations this morning, saying that she was no one's pawn. What are we hearing from the president now, briefly, Michael?
Well, I think we're hearing nothing, which is, which speaks volumes when it comes to this president, Tracy. So the fact that Donald Trump hasn't tweeted, hasn't come out and said anything, means that perhaps he was thinking about what he said yesterday when he gave that long press conference, that he's looking at this testimony and digesting it himself. And that's all we can glean from what the president's done or hasn't done this afternoon.
Okay, Michael, sure, a long day ahead still. Thank you for that insight from Capitol Hill. Let's bring in attorney and behaviour expert Wendy Patrick and psychologist Dr. Frieda Birnbaum. Appreciate having both of your perspectives here with us on i24 News. Frieda and Wendy, help us understand the perspective of sexual violence and assault victims as well as the impact of the Me Too movement. Wendy, we'll start with you. Of course, Trump deciding to bring up George Washington and the skeletons he might or might not have in his closet. We're living in starkly different times now. How has the Me Too movement influenced Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing?
Well, the way it's influenced the confirmation hearing, Tracy, is it has caused everyone, the American people and everybody in the Senate, to want Dr. Ford to be heard. One of the things the Me Too movement has significantly impacted is not just empowering and encouraging victims to come forward, but making sure that they are granted the opportunity to actually speak and have their testimony considered, have their voices heard. Having said that, we still are in a country of laws, and due process is afforded to whoever is being accused, in this case, Judge Kavanaugh. And it is that dynamic that is on display on the world scene today, as you have one side versus the other. This would never go down this way in a criminal court, by the way. I've been questioning witnesses for years, and it would never go this way. They try to say, oh, yes, but it's not a criminal proceeding. But it's a search for the truth in every bit as much as a criminal proceeding is a search for the truth. That is why when Judge Kavanaugh came out swinging today, we saw a different man than we saw on the Fox News interview on Monday night. And that is the kind of response that we will probably see more of when you do have these allegations that, unlike many of the people that were accused during the Me Too movement, are categorically and unequivocally denying the allegations, as Judge Kavanaugh is.
And Frieda, to you, we often hear the question, why did it take so long for the victim to come out about it? Is that a question to delegitimize the accusation? Why does it matter what took so long?
Well, it matters to the victim. We have to understand that there's a lot of shame involved discussing intimate experiences with someone who assaulted you and being open for your credibility and being questioned for what you're saying. And most of all, there's fear. There's fear about a stigma, your future. It could affect your relationship. It could affect your career. Your family could be at risk for being assaulted over again. And then again, you become victimized each time you discuss this. So it's very traumatic for the person who had to experience this assault.
Right, and my question was more about why, I suppose, the public looks at the victim and say, well, why did it take you so long? Because, of course, those reasons that you point to are more than legitimate. So, Wendy, to you, why would a woman at this stage of her life and her career, a very successful one at that, risk destroying all of that and, of course, going to jail if it's a lie at the request of Democrats or for any other reason as she's been accused?
Tracy, it happens every day. Delayed disclosure is closer to the rule than the exception. Delayed disclosure does not equal dishonesty, but credibility counts. You heard Dr. Ford explain some of the reasons she didn't tell her parents. She's at a party drinking beer with boys. Most people can understand that. Now, it is true that many victims tell someone, but in terms of your question, why come forward so many years later, she basically answered those questions under oath, and that will be a huge point of discussion between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans are going to say it's politically motivated. The Democrats are going to say she wanted to make sure that somebody knew about this, and maybe she really thought she could remain anonymous. She presented a very sympathetic, really figure at the hearing today, but she's also very smart. Another thing that will cut both ways. But in terms of her coming out this many years after the fact, I'm not surprised at that. I see people do that in the courtroom every day. But it's the political reasons more than the personal reasons that are going to impact the vote for Judge Kavanaugh.
And it certainly appears that looking at how grueling that hearing is, that there's a lot to put yourself through and not a lot to gain. So, Frieda, to you, why might a victim, as we heard from this particular victim, choose not to name their perpetrator, like we heard from Dr. Ford? She mentioned that she'd been assaulted outside of therapy, but never by name.
You know, we're talking about a situation where this is a supreme justice of the courts. We're talking about someone who will be known around the world and who will have an effect, even at times more than the President of the United States. So we are dealing with not just someone who assaulted her, and she has the right to go ahead and speak about that as well, of course. But this is something that can change the world, and it's a very revolutionary time psychologically for women as well, because women are given a voice now. Instead of saying that they have a stigma for coming out, they're being told that they're heroes. That's what she was told. And women are listening to that message, and we are really right now in a revolution about coming out and not being victimized further when we are assaulted. And this is a wonderful time for us to hear about Dr. Ford, what she has to tell us, what she has to tell younger people, and what she has to tell men as well. Because, you know, the norms have changed. Men are coming on board and supporting women. So the fear factor is less so as well. And I must say that listening to Dr. Ford today told me that we are going to have victims not victimized anymore, because they will be heroic,
right,
and people will listen to them, and you know what's going to happen. Men will think twice before they try to take advantage of women.
And just very briefly, Wendy, we have, of course, in the president, a man who's talked about fame allowing a man to grab women by the genitals, saying that he understands Kavanaugh's position because he's had many false accusations made against him. How much is the fear of being perceived as a liar prevent women from coming out?
That's another big part of it. And, you know, listening to both of you talk, in the real world, this Senate hearing should have expert witness. Maybe somebody like Frieda would be called to the stand to testify as an expert, as a psychologist, about why delayed disclosure occurs and why women are exactly, as you said, Tracy, afraid of being portrayed as liars. On the other hand, Judge Kavanaugh would have a misidentification expert talk about how the relevance and the significance of the fact that Dr. Ford doesn't know how she got there, how she got home, when it was, where the house was, what summer it was, what year it was. The fact that she was sexually assaulted, that appears to be clear. So those are the two sides of the story, and those are the things that the senators are going to have to consider and decide without the benefit of all kinds of expertise that would take place in a real court.
All right, unfortunately, ladies, we are out of time, but of course appreciate those perspectives and for being with us here on i24 News. That does bring us to the end of today's edition. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm Tracy Alexander. Thanks for joining us.